Welcome, everyone. Hi, Farah. Hi, Alicia or Alicia.
Hi.
Hi, Jose. Oh, I'm seeing some familiar names in here, which is fun. So we're going to get started in a few minutes, but while we're waiting, I'd love to hear about the communities that you're working on. So if you could put into the chat a little bit about the community that you're working on or thinking of working on and why, like why you're working on. And you can put that into the chat, or if you'd like, you can just unmute. Hi, Hader. Nice to see you here. Looking to build a community on life balance and defining success in a holistic way. That's awesome. Jenny, I just put the question in the chat. I'm asking you to put in the chat what's the community you're building and why you're building. Farah, I have a community for couples who like to travel. My husband and I lived 3 years nomadically and really miss the connection of other couples. Oh, that's awesome. That's such a cool way to find people who have something in common and who kind of see the world in the same way. That's cool. And then haters, why? Because I struggled with life balance myself and I want to support others through the doubts and struggles. Makes sense. Just one more minute if anyone else wants to put anything into the chat about the community you're building and why you're building it. And then Jenny's, my community is called Digital Nomad Girls, and I have a membership, the DNG Inner Circle too. Cool. Kaliza, I'm building a safe space for online fiction writers to grow together and trade resources, tips, and tricks. That's awesome. And Alicia, Mindful Labs, a mindful self-regulation space for parents, caregivers, educators, and youth to learn mindful tools supporting mental health and well-being for all. Cool. It sounds like some of you might have some communities, like topics in common, even if it's for different audiences. So that's cool. And then Jenny says, my membership is nearly 4 years old, but I'm mixing up my onboarding and a lot of other things too. Cool. Yeah. So today should be, no matter what phase of building community, hopefully what we go through today gives you some clarity and kind of like taking a step back and seeing what your community maybe looks like now, or maybe what you want it to look like in the future. So I'm just going to get started. This is going to be recorded, and I think they're going to put it into the Ness Labs library. And just let someone else in. So you will get access to this. And also if you signed up via Luma, I have your email and I can send you the recording and anything else. Okay, so let's get started. Give me a second to start sharing my screen and doing the things. This always takes longer than I want it to. Okay. You should be able to see my screen. Please unmute at any point if you're seeing things that don't look right and just let me know. I will be checking the chat once in a while, but sometimes I won't see it. So if there's something urgent, feel free to unmute and just let me know. It's a small group. So, oh wait, I lost my thing. Here we go. Okay. Just let somebody else in. All right, we're ready. So this is the question I just asked you all. The reason I ask about your why is because that matters a lot when you're building community. I believe that however you connect people is how you inherently see connection for yourself. So your history with your friends, your history with how you have met people in other communities, your family life, all of that goes into the type of community that you build. And that's the reason why every community looks very different, feels very different, and is very different. So thinking about your why, I always think is really important. So about me, I'm Tatiana, and my job is to help founders build profitable, what I call community businesses that are engined for connection and belonging. So I work with people who are at the intersection of designing a community experience that's also part of their business, and that also brings in money for whatever they're doing. And my experience kind of brought me to this on the community side because I am an immigrant. I was born in Brazil and I moved to the US when I was 10 years old. So it was that experience of being in a new place and trying to adapt and kind of seeing connection in a way of being an outsider, I believe that's where like my community brain started to work and make those connections. And then in my work, I've always worked with small businesses. I started in sales and I went into tech and helped build tech teams and products. And then the main product that I helped build is actually a startup that helps people with connection within big companies. So I've been thinking about connection programmatically for a long time. And then the work that I do now kind of brings that all together. And I feel really lucky to work with the people who I get to work with. So before we get started, every time I do a presentation like this, I always start with some definitions. Community is a word that gets thrown around a lot, and we don't all have the same definition of it. I think that's good. I just think it's important for us to get clear on what it means for each of us. The reason I asked about your why and about like your history of friendship and how you see community is because that's going to be in your community, and that's going to be in your definition of community also, and that's going to matter to the community that you ultimately build. So I'm going to give you my definition of community, but I invite you to question it, and I invite you to have your own based on what matters to you. So to me, a community is a group of people interested in nurturing their own and one another's growth. All the communities that I've studied and all the communities that I've enjoyed being a part of, including this one, including Ness Labs, are about taking people from where they are now to an ideal and where they want to get to. That doesn't have to mean like making more money. That doesn't have to mean anything. It could just be becoming a better person, becoming a more mindful person. But I think growth is something that I've seen that is a theme in most communities. People aren't just getting together to see each other, they're getting together to go somewhere together. So that's how I define community. And then a community business is an organization that makes money from facilitating the connections that help people grow. So if it's a community is a community, but if it's a business, then the core of that business has to be the facilitating of the connect. So now that we have the definitions out of the way, I'm just going to show you kind of where we're heading to at the end of this. So the idea is to build a map for your community that kind of looks like this. And this is just like spoiler alert, yours isn't going to look like this, but something like this, but for your own community. So as we're talking through all the different pieces of this and the different colors and why things look this way, just keep in mind your own community, and like maybe it'll spark different ideas for you as you're going along. And then at the end, we'll have time for you to pull this together. And you can do this with pen and paper, or you can use, like I use Whimsical, or you can use Scapple or Scapel or any of these other tools that kind of help you mind map. So whatever you're already familiar with, or pen and paper. But for now, just listen and we'll get to that point where I'll share more information. So you notice this graph has 3 different colors. And the reason it has 3 different colors is because these interactions, these community experiences that are happening, they're happening at 3 different levels. And the 3 levels are big group, small group, and one-on-one. So every community that you can think of, all the interactions, everything that's happening within that community happens within one of these 3 levels. We're going to talk more about each of these, but I find it is a helpful way to kind of identify the different things that you're doing and also identify problems. So maybe this community doesn't feel quite right because there's not enough effort being put into the one-on-one piece and vice versa. So I find it as a helpful kind of framework. It's based on a lot of different things. So organizations are organized in this way. There's always like the CEO, the head of the company. There's the team level where norms and things get set within the team. And then there's also like the manager direct report relationship where the one-on-one gets set. Political campaigns are also set up in this way. So that's another kind of structure that kind of works in this way. But anyway, we'll talk about it more in the context of your community, but just so you can kind of start visualizing it. Like if you look at it this way, it's the big group is kind of like everything. The small groups fit within that. And then the one-on-one either fit within the small group or somewhere else within the community. There's another thing that I base this kind of framework on, and it's the 3 dimensions of loneliness. So communities, what they do, hopefully if we're doing them right, is they're helping people feel like they belong to something. And the opposite of feeling like you belong is feeling lonely. And I was reading a lot about loneliness and the dimensions of loneliness, the different kind of types of loneliness, and they also map to this structure. So there's 3 types of loneliness. One is collective loneliness, and that's feeling like you don't have a place in the world and you don't have anything to believe in, and it's like this existential kind of loneliness, which maps to the big group piece. There's relational loneliness, where you feel like you don't belong to any group, like you don't have a group of people who you can claim as your tribe, as your people. And then there's emotional loneliness, which is about lacking one-on-one relationships and lacking like those deep confidants that you can count on, like a good friend or like a romantic partner. So those, I like to think about this as I'm brainstorming what the experiences could be, because it could like unlock a few things too if you're thinking about it through the loneliness spectrum. So here again is what that could look like for your community. And now we're going to talk about each one of these different things and what they actually look like within your community. But I'm going to check the chat in case anyone has any questions, or feel free to unmute if anyone has any questions at this point.
Tatiana, I do have a question regarding like the big group, small group, and one-on-one. There's also like interaction between community members and interaction with the community organizer or the person who's like, I don't know, community host. So does the organizer have to be involved in these interactions, or what's their involvement?
Yeah, it varies a lot depending on the community. I see your role as the organizer, as the leader of the community, as like the architect of what this could look like. So everything we're going to talk about here, these things don't happen by themselves. So the reason why we're kind of mapping this out is so that you can kind of influence and encourage a certain kind of connection between people. And I see like your role is in encouraging those connections, not necessarily to be in the room at all times. If a community is working really well, you're not going to be in the room for most of these interactions. Like, and Laura's not here, but we're meeting, and we're part of this bigger community. So yeah, so I say like your role is like in architecting this and kind of encouraging people to connect in the way that you think would work, and then kind of evaluate how they're doing it and change. So big group experience. So what does that mean? The big group experience is really about like what you stand for and why you're all gathering. So not just like the people who are interested in community within Ness Labs, but like why does Ness Labs exist? And what are the collective values that we're kind of agreeing to by participating in this community? So it's about like the why you're getting together, like what's happening there. It emphasizes what everyone has in common, not just certain people within the community. And then it also informs anything else that happens within your community, because everything else should be connected to what the values and the purpose of your community is. And then it's also a place where you kind of celebrate the growth and progress that's happening within your community. So what that looks like, the experiences that fall into big group experiences. So if you have a community platform, the welcome message that's there, that's like a big group experience. That's everyone's reading that. That's like a statement of what you stand for. A kickoff party, an annual retreat, anything that everyone is invited to and is designed for the big group counts as a big group experience. Yeah, any place where everyone shows up, like the public channels in your community platform. If you send, even if you're sending things by email and you send like a weekly recap email, that should be with this big group, like reinforcing the values and saying what we all stand for. So that's kind of like what the big group experience could look like. It's really important to reinforce this as much as you can, because if you don't, what you risk doing is splitting your community off into smaller groups that don't feel like they're cohesive and belong to a bigger whole. So that's big group. So now we're going to talk about small groups. And I have a quote that I really like. I tweeted about Peter Block the other day. This is like my favorite community book. Like literally, I have it right here. The small group is the unit of transformation and the container for the experience of belonging. The small group is the structure that allows every voice to be heard, and it's in groups of 3 to 12 that intimacy is created. So the small group is really the glue of this whole thing, and what that usually looks like. Let me go on to the next. So small group is how you give people a way to sort themselves based on like a specific goal that they have or a specific identity. So you'll see that in communities that have like a smaller group structure. And it's really important because if you think about like anyone who you've been friends with for a long time, you probably met that person in a small group. So was there like a sports team that you played in? Was there a classroom that you went to together? It's important because that you have to see people a few different times before you're comfortable enough to connect with them one-on-one and to really start forming those relationships. And the big group is kind of too broad and too big to make that happen as your community gets bigger. So the small group is more specific and is a better container for people to meet one-on-one. And it's also a better container to kind of connect back to the big group experience and like why you're here anyway. So it's a super important thing. If you're just launching, you shouldn't necessarily launch a bunch of small groups, but it's something to kind of aspire to and to kind of build towards. So again, like people can build long-term friendships or partnerships. Part of building a small group structure helps you distribute leadership, which means that you don't have to be in the room for everything that happens, like I was saying before. And then it's also a good way if your community is getting bigger and in the big group, there's like clearly like smaller groups that are talking about a topic that is not relevant to everyone. It's a good way to not distract from what should be happening in the big group experience. And then, yeah, it's a great way to build ownership and to make more leaders within your community, which ultimately makes people feel more involved and makes people feel more engaged in what you're doing. So examples of what this looks like. This is an example of a small group experience that's happening within Ness Labs. So this is like a member-led event. There are also support groups, there are masterminds. All of these can be more or less facilitated by the community leader. So it could be that you just set up a structure that people can kind of come and follow, or it could be that you're facilitating the mastermind, so you're in the room when that's happening. So think broadly about it. The general idea is that it's splitting people off into more specific things that they're interested in. So here are the Ness Lab support groups as an example. And these, at least within Ness Labs, these all run pretty differently. So I'm in the newsletter one, for example, and they meet once a week on Wednesdays. They have guests sometimes. They also have a Twitter thread that you can participate in. So they've kind of like built the kind of group that they wanted to have, still within the community and still participating within Ness Labs, but it's completely led by people that are in the community. It's not an official effort from Ness Labs, but other ones work differently. I've been to a couple book lovers events, which were really fun too, which were very different. It's like once a month and everyone talks about the books that they read. Anyway, just advertising some other small groups within this community if you want to participate. And then lastly, there's the one-on-one connections. So I've already mentioned one-on-one because it's super important. A lot of people, like I talked about the loneliness in the beginning, a lot of people when they're joining a community, even when they hear the word community, they're joining because they want to make friends. Even if they don't say it that way, even if they don't even know themselves that that's what they're doing, they want to hang out with people who have things in common with them, and they want that to turn into deeper relationships. And your role is to kind of help that happen. And helping people meet one-on-one is hard, and you would have to be more explicit than you think you do. So again, it's likely a goal for your members, and your role is really to establish the norms that make it a little bit less awkward to reach out. You can like design what it looks like to go from someone who's a stranger to people who have something in common and want to meet more than once, and then eventually turn into friends. Remembering again, like the friends that any friends that you're friends with for a long time, it takes a long time for that to turn into a person that you can call a friend. So making it like a safe space for people to develop those friendships over time by seeing each other over and over, and by having something to do every time, that having like a path to becoming friends. And then with one-on-one, the rules and the safety are really important. So putting in a structure that has very clear rules and doesn't make people feel excluded, and that clearly states what is allowed and what isn't allowed within the community is really important for any one-on-one structure. So here are the examples: matching people up into like thinking buddies, accountability partner. If your community has some kind of directory where people can see a list of people, that's a really good thing that lends people to connect one-on-one, because they see what people that they might have something in common with. DMs, if you have a community platform. Breakout rooms are also a way to connect people one-on-one. So if you're hosting an event and you break people off into smaller groups or one-on-one. And then one thing that I recommend a lot and that I used to do is, if you're hosting an event, or you can do this in your community platform, making ask offers, or you can call them something else, having everyone share like what their ask is from the community and what they can offer to the community. Like, I'm a really good web designer, so I can sit with you and critique your site for 30 minutes. And then maybe somebody else is a really good marketer and they can kind of offer that, and making it really clear what each person can offer in the community. And then you can do that within an event, and then send an email after and saying, like, with the list of what everyone is good at and what everyone needs help with, and then encourage people within that email to connect with each other. So it's just another like specific example on how you can make those happen and how you can get those started. So within Ness Labs, they do this in two different ways. There's both mind match, which is they match you with someone who you might want to chat with. And then there's also thinking buddies, where you post the kind of thinking buddy that you're looking for, and you go there and find someone to meet with one-on-one. So now we're going to start to kind of map this out and what it looks like for your own community. But I want to pause again to see if there are any questions so far. Okay. So the first step that we're going to do together, and I'm going to give you just like 2 to 3 minutes to do this, just list out all your ideas for big group, small group, and one-on-one experiences for your own community. And I have a cheat sheet here for you as you're doing this. So you'll see the examples at the bottom there and all the information that you need for each of these. But just list these out on a piece of paper, or if you want to start putting them into if you're doing it digitally and you want to start putting it into that tool, you can do that also. But what you're listing off here is like the specific ways that this manifests in your community. So do you have like a message within your community that explains your purpose and values? List that. Do you have a way for people to meet one-on-one? List that. And feel free to get as specific or as broad as you'd like. And also, depending on how you want to use this, feel free to list out what you're doing now, or list out what you want to do in the future, or any new ideas that you have. So I'll give you 2 minutes. So at 32 after the hour, we'll come back. So just a quick brainstorm. Okay. So now that you have a draft of all the different big group, small group, one-on-one experiences, the next step is to make your visual map about how each activity level relates to each other. So I recommend having 3 different colors for big group, small group, and one-on-one. And we're going to talk about these later, and I'd love to get some examples based on what you're doing and answer any of the questions that you have. But I don't want to talk too much about it before you do it, because I think there are different ways that people think about this, and I don't want you to think about it in the way I think about it. So these are all the different pieces that you can put into your either digital or pen and paper tools, and then connect them based on how they work for your community. So I'm not going to say anymore. So this is what you're doing, something like this, but using just the ones that you listed out. Okay. I hope that went well. There is one more step that I'll just quickly mention for you to think about. Then I want to hear more from you all and what you came up with. So step 3 is basically, can you connect each basically end of your thread back into another level of experience? So if you're designing a small group experience, how can you connect that back to the values and purpose of your community so that it feels more cohesive? Or if it's a big group experience, is there an opportunity for you to tie in a one-on-one prompt so that people are connecting one-on-one? So anything that you've kind of come up with or anything that you're already doing that lives within the map, can you like go one more step and connect it back towards something else? So that's the third step. I'm gonna, before I hear from you, I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the work that I do and kind of like how this fits into like the broader kind of curriculum that I teach people and I coach people on. So this is the curriculum of my course. It's called Build a Community Business. And what we're doing now, it's actually the first time that I'm teaching it this way, but it's the bird's eye view lesson, which is like, how can you like zoom out and see your entire community? But it lives within these 5 pillars that I have determined help you build a community business. So a lot of the course is about kind of the intersection between, okay, what does that community experience look like? What is the offer that you're making people? And how does that tie into your business model and how you make money? So if kind of like going deeper into this, if any of this interests you, I would love to hear from you. I have a weekly newsletter that you can subscribe to. It's businessofcommunity.co. I'll drop these links in the chat actually. My course is at buildacommunitybusiness.com, and on that page, you'll see the link to book a call with me. That call is totally for you to use however you want. We can chat about some of this stuff and I can answer questions for you about the course or about anything else that you're doing with community. If you're doing this kind of work, I want to somehow help you or meet you. So please reach out. Oh, thanks for putting those in the chat later. So yeah. Oh, even the Calendly link. Thank you. So now I'd like to just hear about how that went, and I could even give you sharing permission because I'd love to see some of the maps that you build or answer any questions that came up as you were doing that. So you can raise your hand or you can put the question in the chat and then we'll go from there. Go ahead.
But sorry, Tatiana, I just wasn't clear about the connections, screen sharing. In terms of the connections, is it like a sort of one activity or like one circle is inviting to another circle? Is that how it works? Let me show you what I did.
Yeah.
So this is what I did basically. So a welcome call, like on a regular basis to welcome new members, let's say monthly welcome calls, and then announcing monthly challenges, but for life balance as like the main topic, and then channels by interest, role, and challenge. So interest would be like community members who want to be polymaths, for example. And a role might be working mothers or working fathers or someone who like freelancers, that kind of thing. And the challenge, maybe it could be like ADHD or struggling with something specific that people might want to create a support group around. These monthly challenges are for specific interests or roles people might want to create. And then peer coaching when like community members support each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just like curious about the connections because I just did the error.
Yeah. One way, I mean, I think you can think about it in different ways. The connections can be like whatever makes sense to you. The way I think about it is from their perspective when they come into the community, like what is their path through your community? So if it starts with the welcome call and then they're like, oh, I'm interested in this polymath channel, so I'm going to join that. And then through the polymath channel, they're like, oh, there's a program within here that I can do peer coaching. So they kind of like the flow that they're going through, you're mapping it out for them. And then what I was saying at the end, like the connection back would be like, let's say they went through that and then they're in the peer coaching. Can something within peer coaching connect them back to a small group, or connect them back to why they're there in the first place? So in the way that you design the peer coaching, is there a way for that to reinforce the community's values and purpose so that they're back at the big group experience? And then the more arrows you can have going through, the tighter the community will be.
Okay, great. Okay, then I'm missing a few connections.
Yeah, and then like when you do this for your community, you can even break it up. Obviously you didn't have time, but you can break it up by what the exact channels are. And maybe within each channel, there are different one-on-one things that can happen. And you're like, you could design it using this kind of flow.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Galisa, we can't hear you.
Sorry. So yeah, I want to ask about the intensity of each experience. Like, does it affect the small group or big group, like the grouping? Because in my case, an experience can be just as simple as, you know, commenting on each other's introduction post, but there's also one that can be so intense, like workshops or one-on-one coaching. And I want to know if that affects like the grouping, because yeah, I also don't know what I don't know, but for me, for me, encouraging my members to greet a new member on their introduction post in the community platform can that be a one-on-one experience, or is that a big group experience?
Yeah, first of all, it's a great idea. I think that's in between big group and one-on-one. It depends how you encourage it. So like one way of encouraging that is to form, I'll go back to your first question in a second, but one way to encourage that is to form like a welcome committee for your community. So then like you're forming a small group of people who are kind of leaders within your community, and their job is to make sure people feel welcome. So then you're creating like a small group experience within that. The actual commenting can lead to a one-on-one experience. Hopefully like you have that path, that path kind of laid out for them too. Like if someone's commenting and they know that kind of the next step is maybe they should DM each other and see if they want to get like a virtual coffee or something like that. And then that turns into like a more one-on-one experience. So I don't know, it depends how you think about it, and it depends how you position it. It is very different, like commenting on something in public. Like it's a different experience where you're having a conversation with someone, but everyone is watching your conversation, which is why people behave differently in Twitter than they do like if you go to a party together, because like we're like, it's like you're having a one-on-one conversation, but like on a megaphone, and everyone else can hear you around you. And that's a different experience, and it's not as intimate as like a real one-on-one. So I would push people to like actually have a one-on-one interaction, but that could be kind of a first step. Like it's a safer first step. Like we're in a group and we're just kind of like connecting as a first step. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thanks.
Jenny, thanks so much for coming. Yeah. Does anyone else want to share their map or ask any questions or brainstorm together? Even if you don't have your camera on, you can totally participate. It's okay if it's not done yet. I mean, I gave you like 6 minutes to do it. So it's connecting people is like a lifelong thing. So it's okay if it's not perfect yet. And Hater's saying, I'd love for you to share stories about the good and bad from what you've seen. Anything specific?
No, like just bad ways people attempted to manage a community.
Okay. Thanks for that question. Again, these are my hot takes, and I think that people can run community however they want to run community. I think that a lot of times what people call community doesn't actually enable people to connect one-on-one at all, or to like lead. So one common mistake that I see people making is that because they're selling something, they're selling like a membership or a course or something that people are going to get community from, they act more as like, I'm doing this for you, and like everything is about like what you can get from this, and they don't emphasize enough that they are agreeing to also participate in this community. It's very different to sell community than it is to sell anything else. And the disaster situation is that everyone feels like they are not getting enough from you, or you're not doing enough for them, because they have this mindset, they paid you to like give them what they need, when community is about what they're bringing to the community. They're a part of the value that the community creates, and not kind of setting that expectation up front can lead to a lot of disconnection, and it can lead to this attitude of like, what am I getting out of this versus like, what can I bring to this? And like, it's my job to help this kind of move along. So I've seen like a couple of disasters because of that problem. But yeah, I think that's like one that's, I think, really important, because it's like a main big difference between community and anything else that you might sell. The other mistake I see people make a lot is they think that these things happen automatically, and they don't. We're all humans and we're all really awkward. So unless you have a path for people and how they should connect, people aren't going to do it on their own. So it's really important for you to say like, this is how you can connect with people in this community. Here's like one step you can take. Here's like a really easy way of you doing that. Don't worry if this is awkward, this is what's going to happen. Like calling out what they might be feeling, so that they feel like it's normal, and they feel like they're not the only one who feels weird reaching out to someone via DM. So that's the other thing, like expecting things to just happen. They don't.
So what if the community is introduced after, because in my case, I'm building a course, and then I build the course first, and then somewhere along the way I decided to introduce the community platform, and everyone is just, I don't know if I'm expecting them to participate, but on their end, I think they didn't pay for this, and they're not expecting that this is going to turn into a course and a community. So I want to know what you'll do if this were you.
Yeah, I think in that case, one thing to maybe consider is to give them a choice to join. Just say like, we want you to come, like you are welcome to come, but if you do, this is what's going to be expected of you, and not please come, please comment, please do stuff. This is a gift that we're giving you. Like more of like, this is what we're doing and this is what's going to happen. And we really want you to come, but if you do, this is what's going to be expected of you. And like having that transition from like, I'm buying a product from you to like participating in this thing that I'm co-creating with this group of people. Cool. I can maybe take one more question. It can be about anything community related, doesn't have to be related to and then we'll close out. Thanks, Farah. Thanks for coming. All right. Thanks, everyone. The links again, I'll include when the recording comes out, I'll include everything there. But yeah, I'm also in Ness Labs, so if you want to DM me on there, feel free. And yeah, thank you all for coming, and thanks for the great questions. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.